Not like the brazen giant of Greek fame, with conquering limbs astride from land to land. Here at our sea-washed sunset gates shall stand a mighty woman with a torch, whose flame is the imprisoned lightning of her name, Mother of Exiles. From her beacon hand glows worldwide welcome. Her mild eyes command the air-bridged harbor that twin cities frame. Keep ancient lands your storied pomp, cries her silent lips. Give me your tired, your poor, your huddled masses yearning to breathe free. The wretched refuge of the teeming shore, send these, the homeless, tempest tossed to me. I lift my lamp beside the golden door. Those are not my words. Those are the words of Emma Lazarus, which adorn the Statue of Liberty. And given today's topic, I felt that that was an appropriate open for us to acknowledge and reflect the history of human migration, and more contemporarily, what we'll focus on today, which is refugee resettlement. So good morning. My name is Tom Caron. I proudly serve as the Vice President of Donor Services for the Community Foundation for Northeast Florida. I want to welcome each of you today to the Donors Forum. The Donors Forum is a unique opportunity, and it's the only opportunity for area grant makers and philanthropists to gather and learn about opportunities for collaborative grant making and collective impact. The Donors Forum is generously supported by the Community Foundation and the Lucy Gooding Charitable Foundation Trust, so we are grateful for both of those organizations for allowing us to be here today. So as today's topic uniquely explores human migration, I want to acknowledge that human migration is not new, right? Human migration is a part of the lived experience of all of us and all of our ancestors. So I think it's important to acknowledge our shared history. So today, I wanted to acknowledge that we are in fact standing on the ancestral lands of the Seminole, Timucua, Muskogee, and Masuki people. On this land, we have seen multiple eras of migration. We have seen indigenous populations removed. We have seen European settlers join. We have also seen worldwide migration. And so we're going to talk about and acknowledge the history of that and more of the contemporary efforts underway to welcome our new neighbors. So most recently, you've probably seen the headlines that there are, I think the last number I saw were thousands of people are moving here every month. So we want to acknowledge a specific group of those individuals who are becoming our neighbors, and those are refugees and asylees from around the world. So today we're going to start in a moment. We're going to have you enjoy your soup and begin conversations at your table. And then Dr. Leslie Kaplan, from the University of North Florida, for whom I've had the pleasure of actually sitting through her lecture to her undergraduate students at the Hicks Honors College, and was blown away by the framing and information that she was able to share and inspire those young undergraduates. So this seed was planted a few months ago, and I'm so excited that it is now coming to fruition for us to learn and hear from Dr. Kaplan. Leslie, I'm gonna retrain myself. So once Leslie completes her remarks, we are then going to be joined by a panel of local experts and community leaders who are supporting refugee resettlement and integration into our community. And then you're going to have an opportunity at your table to reflect and learn about an individual story of their own migration to our community. So we wanted to start at like a 30,000-foot view and then work our way down to a very individualized story. As you were joining us this morning, hopefully you had an opportunity to see the examples of Weave Tales migrant stories that are in the back. If you haven't seen those, I encourage you to take a look when you are leaving today. These are just a sample of some of the work that Basma Alawe, who is one of our esteemed guests, will speak to a little bit later. So with that was a lot of me talking. I'm going to allow you all to enjoy your soup. We're going to take a 10-minute break to enjoy beginning of our lunch, and then Leslie will take the podium in a few minutes. Thank you.
Please enjoy your lunches. I'm just going to give you a little bit of an overview. It's probably more than 30,000 feet because I'm going to give you kind of a global perspective, and then we'll narrow down to Jacksonville. As Tom said, I'm the director of the Hicks Honors College, and I have the distinct privilege of teaching 2/3 of the honors freshmen every year, and for the last 13 years, the topic that we've been teaching them is about immigration and national identity, which is a great topic for critical thinking. It was not so political in 2010 when I began as it has become now, but that's added an additional layer of benefit, I think, for the students as they learn how to talk about politically challenging conversations with each other in a very mixed audience. So I really enjoy what I do. Okay, so let's just jump in here. So I want to begin by looking globally at the problem because it starts well before somebody is resettled in the U.S. And you can see here the 103 million displaced. That number is the sum of the other three. So over half of people who are displaced are internally displaced, which means they can't live in their home, but they're somewhere in their country. 32.5 have achieved refugee status, so that is an official legal category that we'll talk about more. And then there's a 17.3 million who are either in other statuses or none at all. And what's really shocking to me about, I mean, these numbers are shocking, right? So 103 million, that is, if this was a country, that would be the 14th largest country in the world. 14th largest. It is larger than any single European nation. I mean, this is incredible. Even just the refugees, the 32.5 million, the measly little 32.5 million, that is larger than the population of Greece, Portugal, and Sweden put together. So the numbers here are staggering. But what's even more shocking to me than the numbers all by themselves is the growth. I use this slide every year, and every year I update it. And in 2016, I started keeping track because I was seeing numbers really jump. And I thought, I gotta start documenting this just for myself. Since 2016, it's doubled. All the numbers have doubled since 2016, which is just horrifying. I don't even know what to make of it. So that is the scope of what we're looking at in this world. So where are all of these displaced people? So a lot of them are internally displaced, right? About half of them are internally displaced. So they're somewhere in their own countries. But really, most of them are in nearby countries. And again, I'm starting to document everything because I'm watching these changes. 2022, this was the top 5 countries. 2023, this is the top 5 countries. So most of the time when somebody has to flee their country, they end up next door. So the countries that are taking the bulk of the pressures of this migration are neighboring countries, not all of which are doing all that well themselves. So you can see Colombia. We have refugees here from Colombia, but 2.5 million refugees have gone into Colombia from neighboring countries. Pakistan, Uganda. So you can see that some of these, Germany in particular, is a European country that has stepped up and really accepted a lot of the refugees. But it puts everybody else to shame. Look at the teeny little tiny diet-sized pieces of pie at the top there. Those are people who've been resettled or returned to their country. And it's 102,000 in 2022. It is 204,000 in 2023. So again, that number has doubled. But it's still a very tiny portion. So when we're talking about refugees, most of them are either somewhere in their own country or in a neighboring country. And when we're thinking about who's here, it is minuscule. It is actually 0.6%, so just over 1/2% of people are resettled permanently in another country. Everybody else is trying to figure out what to do day to day, month to month, year to year. So the next question is, what is a refugee? Since that's really that tiny category that we're looking at. And it's a legal definition. So there are migrants who are people who are moving. There are immigrants, people who have moved permanently. there's legal and illegal immigrants. In the category of legal immigrants, one subset is refugees, and that is a legal status. And this is the definition. So someone who's forced to flee his or her country because of persecution, war, or violence. So that means it is not because of climate change. It's not because I'm looking for a better life. It's not because there was some kind of a natural disaster. It is specifically because of human-caused issues. And what they have to do to become a refugee, to gain that status, is they have to document. They have to find some way to prove that they have a well-founded fear of persecution because of race, religion, nationality, political opinion, or membership in a particular social group. And a refugee applies from a third country. An asylee is the same definition, but they apply from the country that they are claiming asylum to. So it's a question of where you do your paperwork, but the definition is the same. So when you hear that, an asylum seeker is someone who is hoping to get that status but does not yet, right? So we've got lots of different words, but the technical definitions are important because it's a legal category. I've tried to lay out a little chart for you. There's also one more legal term here in the US, which is a parolee, which is a short-term status, just a couple of years. So that's kind of the big picture of the terminology. So we sort of covered where people are. And the next question is, who are they? Who are these people who've had to flee? They come from, right now, the top 5 countries are Syria, Venezuela, Afghanistan, South Sudan. Sorry, this was last year. South Sudan and Myanmar. This year it's Syria, Venezuela, Ukraine, Afghanistan, and South Sudan. And you can see that this is really a humanitarian effort. 40% are children. 11% are babies. They're under 5 years old. 22% are women. So it's a humanitarian effort. To become a refugee, the screening process takes, at this point, a minimum of 18 months. It's probably longer right now. If you have to document everything. And then this is there isn't room on a screen to put the length of this thing here, so I've just given you the top part of it. But the screening is intense. There's biodata, biometrics, there's iris scans, proof that they qualify, proof. I mean, how do you prove that you're being targeted? So the number of people who are able to do that is very small. There's enhanced security checks from all sorts of offices, National Counterterrorism Center, the FBI, Homeland Security, the State Department, the Department of Defense. They're looking for security risks, connections to bad actors, warrants or violations. They check their social media. Every time there's any new information, they go back through and do everything again. So the security is intense. There's a medical screening, fingerprints. Anytime there's any question, they re-interview, and an interviewer can say no for any reason. They don't have to say, oh, well, this. They just say no. So if you look shifty, you're out. So that's part of why the numbers are so tiny. And then when they travel, there's another set of screenings from Customs and Border Patrol, the TSA, all sorts of things. So what you need in order to become a refugee is unbelievable persistence, unbelievable organization, because if you say something, if you've got a different date or a different name or some different detail and some interviewer catches it, you're out. So you have to be incredibly organized, incredibly persistent, and with incredible will. If you make it through all of this, then you come to a place like Jacksonville, and you're picked up at the airport, and you can volunteer to do this yourself if you'd like to. It's a wonderful experience welcoming somebody for the first moment to our city as a new neighbor. They are given an apartment. My son actually works for Lutheran Social Services, and he's the apartment setup and donation coordinator. So if you have beds or cribs or furniture, let me know, and I will connect you with him. So I've been with my son and helped him set up an apartment. It's very basic. The apartments are as low rent as possible because refugees have to be self-sufficient in 90 days. So they arrive here. They probably got 2 weeks' notice of where they were going, so they did not know they were coming to the U.S. Lots of people have English. That's a good thing. But lots of people don't have English. So they may not have any English. They arrive here. They're met at the airport. They're brought to an apartment. They're shown maybe they've not had electricity before. Maybe they're used to cooking on an open fire. Or maybe they are middle class. And, this tiny apartment looks like a dump. All sorts of different experiences. They're given help getting enrolled in public assistance, basic health care, food stamps, TANF. They're helped with connect to English, Catholic charities. Their kids are helped to be enrolled in school. There's some employment training. There's a job referral service. And then 90 days, you need to be paying your own bills. They also arrive in debt because that plane ride over here, the government pays for it, and then it goes on your tab, and you have something like about maybe up to about 5 years to pay that off. And if you are a family with 6 kids, and mom and dad are working and the kids are little, you have to figure out how to pay off that $1,500, $2,000 airline tickets on your minimum wage job. So after the 90 days, and this is where Beyond 90 comes in because they help at this point, they need to be self-sufficient. There are some other services that will expire after a year, and at that point, they're probably just eligible for whatever public assistance any citizen living in poverty is eligible for. So it's fairly intense. In terms of Jacksonville, these are the places right now where families are coming from. So Ukraine is the big one right now. Again, this looked very different a couple of years ago. Ukraine and Afghanistan are the 2 biggest ones. These are some other of the countries that they're seeing a lot of, but there are many other countries. Jacksonville's really interesting because we are not the largest place in Florida. We don't get the most numbers, but we have the widest diversity of families resettled. So we have the most number of countries represented. The schools have stepped up. So Englewood High School, I think they have 90 languages spoken in that high school, which is really incredible. And it's a newcomer school, which means that kids can be in a protected English class so that they can get help at least with that subject as they're learning to speak English and helping translate for their parents. Just to back out a little bit, these are Florida statistics through 2020. And you'll notice very quickly, if you are comfortable at all with numbers, that there's some big variations here. And that's really, from my point of view, the heartbreak of what's been going on in the refugee resettlement world. This was a bipartisan issue. So let me back up and give you some history. The refugee resettlement idea started in World War II as a response to the displaced Europeans, and in particular the Jewish community. And that started the first of the acts that was bringing in people because there were quotas. And so this allowed more people beyond the quotas to come in. And then the U.S. had several other acts, another one in the 1970s to do with the Vietnam War and bringing in those families, and then in 1980. So the first one was the Displaced Persons Act of 1948, and then 1975, and that created the Refugee Act of 1980. Jacksonville has been resettling refugees since that first time period. So Lutheran Social Services, Laura, do you know when it opened? I'm going to put you on the spot here. It was in the... Yeah, so Jacksonville has been welcoming these families who've arrived as refugees really since the beginning, after that, since the Vietnam War, basically. And it's been a bipartisan issue all that time. And it's heartbreaking to see What happened in 2015, 2016, it had to do with the migrant crisis in Europe, all of our television screens filled with those images of people walking, increasing pressure on our southern border, and then politics took hold. And as soon as that happened, we had an influx, and then we had a backlash. And we're still now in that horrible, volatile situation where one administration comes in and says yes, and the other one comes in and says no, so we're now a political football. And it's heartbreaking because this was bipartisan for all of those years. And thinking about that Emma Lazarus poem, as I teach about refugees to my students, I bring in a historian, I bring in a biologist who talks about human migration in the tens of thousands years scale. I bring in a criminologist, I bring in an economist, and the conclusion that I've come to after looking at this through all of those different lenses after 10 years is that it's a strength. The refugee program in particular is a strength, and this is part of what it means to be as an American, that these stories of coming as an American. I myself am Jewish, so I'm tied to that, to the earliest stories of refugees. The refugee program didn't exist when my family was coming because we came at the turn of the century, but my family came as refugees, and many of our families came as refugees. We were fleeing something. And so this is, it feels personal to me. So I'm heartbroken to see that cooperation and that sense of shared identity being lost today. In Jacksonville, you can see I was only able to find numbers going back to the early 2000s, but you can see the ups and downs that we've had. So we have the same trajectory. Also, thinking about what I've learned in looking at this issue through so many lenses, the economic impact of having this level of diversity in our community is extraordinary. So here's some statistics about the economic impact. 1.4 billion immigrant taxes paid, 9,000 immigrant entrepreneurs. For many immigrants, one route to self-sufficiency and to being able to bring your family the American dream is owning a small business. And so drive by any aging strip mall, and you will find lots of little tiny businesses. If you go into the Beach Boulevard Flea Market, which is full of micro businesses in the little stalls, you'll see lots of immigrant families who are contributing to our economy and contributing to the incredible diversity, all of the ethnic restaurants that we enjoy, all of the little ethnic stores where we can find wonderful things to eat from all sorts of countries. I talk to my students about how in Jacksonville, if you start going up and down Beach Boulevard, you can travel the world without a plane ticket. You walk into one of those stores and you smell the smell of the spices, and you see what it looks like when somebody's cutting fish up in front of you instead of way behind in the Publix. And I actually send my students out for what I call diversity assignments, where it's my little introduction to study abroad by making use of the incredible resources that we have here in Jacksonville. So I'm going to stop there. There's a whole lot more I could say. Actually, I want to show one more slide. I was trying to come up with a list of the resettlement landscape. Jacksonville has been a very welcoming community. We have a number of organizations. I was trying to identify ones that were specifically focused on new immigrants and refugees, and so this is the list that I was able to come up. I'm sure that I have left some things out, some important ones, and if any of the partners here can see something that I'm missing, please shout it out. But these are a number of organizations who are helping with our new neighbors resettle. I love having my students, so UNF Honors is right there. I love having my students participate as volunteers because new immigrants, that persistence and that level of organization that people who actually get resettled must possess in order to have gone through that process makes them a very, very easy population to assist, because what they need is a hand up, not a hand out. What they need is, what does this say? I can't understand the bureaucratic language on this crazy form. Or, I don't understand what these magnet schools are about. Why isn't it just school? Or, I don't understand what an AP class is. What is my kid doing here? These are things that my 18-year-old students can help with. They need help with language. They need help just learning how to have a conversation with an American who has an American accent, and learn that. That's something that my students can help with. And so it's tremendously rewarding for my students. What my students notice when they help this population is that they get way more than they give. The generosity. One of my students was working with a Burmese family. The mom, they were really working with the kids, but the mom came out one time at the beginning and kind of looked at them really intently, and they were freaked out by this, so they came back and said, like, she was really staring at us. 3 weeks later, she came back with handmade Burmese clothing for all of them. She'd been sizing up their frames. The amount of food that is pushed very strongly on my students to try, and the level of hospitality that they receive, these are all things that the students remark on. So I feel grateful as a teacher to have this incredible opportunity for my students not only to start thinking about philanthropy and giving back at age 18, to see that they have the power at 18 to make a difference, and then to have a response like that where they feel like, I actually really helped them with something. And it didn't take much. And look at what they've done with it. And I get all those stories all the time. So we have a very welcoming community. It is a wonderful population to work with. It doesn't take much to set them on their feet and have them then contributing back to our community. But those first months are really tough. I guess I'll just show one more slide. These are the common occupation for immigrants in our community here in Jacksonville. This is a little bit out of date, and there might be some changes, but these are the kind of jobs that they have. You can imagine the kind of salaries that they're making. The big barrier is language. Without language, these are the kinds of things that you're doing. You've got a family of 8, you're trying to raise your kids. It's really the kids, it's that next generation that's going to be successful and do well. So the families need a lot of assistance, especially in that first 90 days, and then when they start losing all those services until they're able to get on their feet. And I'll stop there. Back to any questions. Thank you very much. Yes, question. There isn't any choice involved. I don't know how they make it on the country decision. Laura might be able to answer that question. But so the refugee program is a federal program, but it's administered through the states. And so the calculation has to do with a combination of job availability, infrastructure, transportation, and those kinds of things. And so, there's a mix of trying to put people near support systems, but not have enormous communities where makes it harder to integrate. So there's a whole lot of factors. I think it's probably a pretty opaque system. Any other questions? And there are a lot of people here who have a lot more on the ground experience than I do, so they will be able to answer some more specific questions. All right, thank you very much.
All right, so at this point, we're going to transition to having a panel of experts join us. So if you are on our panel, if you could join me over here on the right to take your seat. We are going to be joined, and I'm going to have, it's always best to have our panelists introduce themselves instead of me trying to memorize it. So as they have a moment to join us, we were able to identify organizations who've been a long-standing impact and effort in supporting refugee resettlement efforts. So we'll have an opportunity. And then Basma, do you mind holding the mic button. It'll turn on fully. And you all get to share that mic, so. So we'll actually start with Lori. I'm going to ask you to introduce yourself and a little bit about your organization and how long you've been supporting Refugees Resettle, and then we'll pass it down the line.
Okay. Well, thank you for being able to be here today. It's a wonderful opportunity. I'm Lori Chelf. We are with Beyond 90. My husband and I co-founded Beyond 90. I just want to give you a really brief background of how we got started because we are relatively young in comparison to Lutheran and Catholic. But my husband and I were living in the South Bank Peninsula, and we had corporate jobs, and we became met our first refugee family at a outreach for needy families. In that time, we then became friendship partners with them through World Relief. They were our family, and at their 90-day point, when their case got closed, there was just such a struggle and an insecurity. They've been told what they need to do. It had been demonstrated, but still in that moment, when it becomes final, there's something about that. And so they called us up, and is the moment with them, and seeing the struggle and this insecurity that really just moved us. And we sold our condo, I quit my job, and we moved into a refugee apartment complex where they were being placed. And we made ourselves available, and we were welcomed into their community, and we got to share in their family celebrations, the birth of their children, and it was truly a wonderful, life-changing, rich experience. But it was in that living life with them that we actually saw that ongoing struggle after 90 days. And that's how Beyond 90 was started. And so we are pick up where resettlement agency programs end. And so we bridge that gap to self-sufficiency. We provide support services where they can walk in, ask questions about their mail. They got into an accident. They don't know how to self-report. We are also the contracted provider for refugee mental health in Northeast Florida. We have some skills building classes like computer and sewing and driver permit test prep class. And we also have a couple of homes that we offer to refugees at below market rent. In addition to that, Beyond 90 is not restricted in who we can serve or how long we can serve them. So they could be here 2 years or 10 years. It doesn't matter. They can come in for help. Last year, we served over 3,000 families from 53 different countries.
Thanks, Lori.
Thank you. Thank you so much for having us.
Do you want your slides now? Or
No,
Later,
for
okay.
later. My name is Besma Alawi, and I am a refugee myself from Baghdad, Iraq. Moved to the state of Florida back in 2010. Did not know that I was coming to Florida, to Orlando first. I did not choose also Orlando, Florida to come to. As many refugees, we don't choose actually to be displaced and to be actually be anywhere in the world. We do want to be in our home with our family and our childhood memories and our job. But for many circumstances, that's what's happened. Back home, I was an engineer working in the oil department, and because of my husband's engagement with the American troops back home in Iraq, we were threatened, we lost family members, friends, and that's where we needed to seek refuge and leave. So 2010, January of 2010, we moved to Florida, and since then we have been calling Florida home. Through the journey, I found was really hard to resettle and integrate in a new society, a different culture, different environment, different language, even though I spoke English in that time, but the American accent was always hard to handle. And through the process, I insisted to at least pick something from what I have spent all my life studying. So I end up teaching math and science in public school in Jacksonville, Florida for 8 years. But continue to advocate for the refugee program because it's a life-saving program. I have went through it, and I want to make sure that America continue to be a nation of refuge. But after the refugee ban happened, that's when I was really outraged as a a refugee myself, and I joined in that time We Are All America through Florida Immigrant Coalition to organize refugees in the state of Florida to protect the refugee program in the state. And we continue to do so. And it's a great program, and it's working, and we want to make sure that continues in our state. And because I did not see that there is an organization in Jacksonville that focused on advocacy and investing in refugees leadership, I founded one, it was a struggle between holding a national position and holding an organization locally, but we have been able to really invest in over 300 refugees leadership and really prepare them to advocate locally, statewide, and even nationally. And actually last year, even globally, I was in Geneva advocating among the US government and advocate with 135 other governments to have refugees in their delegation when they go to the UN. So our work actually reached all the way to Geneva. I'm really excited to share this space with organizations, which one of them was Resettled Me back in 2010, and it's been really a great honor to call Jacksonville home.
Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Helay Nurzai. I work with Catholic Charities as a Refugee Resettlement Program Manager. And same as Basma, I'm a refugee myself. I came to United States in 2015. And currently, I'm helping others because I've been in their shoes. I know what they have been through, so I can really understand them. So Catholic Charities, we work closely in relationship with federal government and also USCCB, which stands for United States Conference of Catholic Bishops, and to ensure that we stay up to date on our refugee arrivals. We have several programs at Catholic Charities that refugees receive services through this program. One of the programs is Reception and Placement Program, which through that program, we before their arrival, we make sure that all those families, they have a safe place to live, they have enough food, clothing before their arrival. And once they arrive to the United States, actually we are serving as their first introduction to our country and our city. Once they're here, we help them with all the other core services, which includes enrolling them in our English classes, which Catholic Charities, they have. We have the ESOL program, referring them to all the other employment program. We have one of the employment program at Catholic Charities, matching grant program, which is an employment based program, and the aim of the program is that more clients become, more refugees become self-sufficient, and also helping them with completing all their legal documents, helping them with their health screening, and I would say we help them from the day they arrive at the airport until they become self-sufficient. And we had a lot of good and successful stories. I'm working with Catholic Charities for almost this July will be 6 years. And I have witnessed a lot of successful stories between my clients. So I'm gonna share one of the stories. As I said, matching grant program, the aim of the program is to become self-sufficient, and within a period of time, we have to submit a report to the government that this client is successful and this client have become self-sufficient. So to do that, I requested a client to submit their recent paychecks or recent pay stubs so I can report them self-sufficient. He was like, you do not need to find me a job. I will take care of myself. I was like, okay. So I requested him to submit his paychecks. So he sends me he was like, I do not have paycheck, but I can share you my bank account, like my bank statement. I was like, yeah, that works. So that will work. So he sends me this bank statement, and he made $17,000 in 1 month. I was like, what are you doing? Like, this is yeah. So he was a refugee. He is a refugee from Ukraine, and he came with a lot of refugees that they come to United States. They come with a lot of skills. So he was doing stucco, like construction, and also flooring. So for a whole month, he worked at double shifts, and he got all those projects. And I ended up going to his workplace and like taking pictures, and like, because I was amazed, and I was like, do you need an assistant? I'm coming. Yeah, so including that, we have seen a lot of successful stories. So I always share that wherever I go for any speaking engagement, I'm like, refugees, they now this story is like from 4 years ago. Now his business has grown. He has hired like 15 other individuals, which the wife, she's making cakes, like Russian and Ukrainian cakes, which for my children birthday parties, I go and I order from her, which is amazing. I can recommend her. So I always say, like, refugees, they are not taking the jobs. They are creating jobs, because he has hired 15 other individuals, and which we all are proud of him.
Good afternoon. My name is Laura Cook. I am the Director of Refugee Resettlement and also the State Contract Manager for the refugee programs in Jacksonville. And I work at Lutheran Social Services. Very much like Catholic Charities, we have a reception and placement program. So that first 90 days, they have a caseworker that will follow them. And then we have a number of services that are offered up to 5 years. So we have an employment program. They can come back as many times as they want. We have a career laddering program, get them into certification programs like being a medical assistant or a dental hygienist. We also have a youth mentoring program. So this is for ages 14 to 24. And we pick them up from school, do after school tutoring. We'll connect them with a volunteer in the community to be their mentor and help them do college applications, study for SATs, or maybe work on interview skills. We also have a program that's just for vulnerable refugees, and so up to 5 years if they have a severe case. Maybe they have a lot of mental health issues, medical issues, children with disabilities, large families. We have a caseworker that can help navigate some of those barriers that they have to self-sufficiency. What else? So we have all those programs. I'm really blessed to work at LSS. We have a really great team. A lot of them are former refugees themselves. We speak over 20 different languages in our staff. So they really are able to relate to the people that are coming in. This past fiscal year 2022, was a crazy year for refugee resettlement, not just us, but everybody sitting up here. As you know, in 2020, we saw about 32 arrivals to LSS. 2021, we saw 60, and this past year we saw almost 400. So we had to rebuild our programs overnight, basically. A lot of that has to do with that Kabul airlift when the U.S. left Afghanistan. So it's been a really interesting ride this past year, and we're looking forward to collaborating more with our community partners and making it a place where they can find peace and hope.
Thanks, Laura. So we're going to have you start. And you shared a little bit about this in your introduction, but can you walk us through, from the moment a refugee, you're contacted, so how much lead time are you aware that you are now responsible for taking care of a family of refugees? And walk through a little briefly about what does that process entail for you and the experience of that refugee family?
Awesome. Well, the U.S. Refugee Admissions Program sits in the State Department, and they work with 9 national agencies. Ours is Lutheran Immigration Refugee Services. So when a refugee is cleared, their case is dispersed to one of those national agencies, and those national agencies going to look at all the affiliates and say, where's the best place that they can resettle? Maybe there's a population of that particular individual's ethnicity or nationality in this particular affiliate, so they're going to send them there. there, or maybe they have a U.S. tie, a family or friend, where they have written on their application, they're going to send them there. So usually we have 2 to 5 week notice of when they're going to travel. Back when we were in 2020, last fiscal year, we had sometimes a 2 to 3 day notice for some families, because that was an extraordinary circumstance where we had a lot of those evacuees from Afghanistan that we had to resettle pretty fast. But generally 2 to 5 weeks. And so during that time, we're finding an apartment, making a budget, making sure that that apartment will fit in their budget. We're collecting donations. We're preparing their file, and then we are getting ready for their airport pickup. At the airport pickup, the caseworker will bring them to their apartment. They'll show them around, do all the safety checks. This is how you lock your doors, how you operate all of the appliances in your apartment, and then they'll come back in 24 hours to check on them, and then that starts that first 90 days. And so we'll do school registration, go to medical appointments. They will get into employment. We'll do cultural orientation, so a crash course on how to live here in Jacksonville in the United States. As much as possible, we bring in partners like JSO. Beyond 90 comes to do a mental health segment for us. And then at that 90 days, we close their case and we refer them out to services if they need any more help.
Thank you, Laura. So Halai, I'm going to ask you, again, as one of the agencies, so we have 2 agencies in Jacksonville who are responsible for resettlement. There used to be a third, which we will talk to a little bit in a moment. But as the other agency who helps resettle, can you provide a little bit of insight on the restrictions? What can you not do with the federal grant? So if you have a refugee family who's moving here, relocating, and you've identified they're in support of this, what can you do or not do, and what gaps do you see in the process?
When they arrive, like a specific program, or
I'm thinking within the first 90 days. So when you have a family, are you able to provide every support that they need, or are there gaps due to restrictions in the federal funding model?
Those programs that are funded through the federal government are really restricted and also really detail oriented. So there are a list of services that has to be delivered to the clients within a specific time and a specific period of time. And there are some services, there are some restriction through. For example, we cannot, if someone is offering help to the agency, and if that individual not clear as their background check, we cannot pair that family with that individual, because the background check has to be done, and then the family can be paired with that sponsor family or with that volunteer, individual volunteer. And also we cannot allow families I understand that most of the time the families we are connecting them with other refugees in the community, and we set up, if we have an Afghan family arriving, we already know which apartment complexes or which side of the town they will go, because we will demonstrate which side of the town we have more Afghanis. But sometimes it happens, especially during the 2021, when a lot of Afghanis were arriving. We had to put them in temporary housing for a certain of time, and they had to stay like for a week or 2 weeks, or most of the time for a larger size families, they had to stay in the temporary housing for a month. So we were not, we were not allowed to let them go with their neighbors who were offering, like taking them to beach or taking them to somewhere outdoors. So I really didn't like that part of it, because we asked few times and we were rejected. So you're like, oh, are they clear? Are they, the background is clear? We're like, okay, we are only 6 caseworkers here. Like back then we were only 4. As Laura said, we had to build the program overnight, because with everything happened previous management administration, we were 15 individual in the team, and we came to 2 caseworkers only. So that, and then back in 2021, when the Afghanistan government collapsed, and then everybody, all of that, like almost 10,000 Afghanis were evacuated to United States. We had to build the program overnight. So we had to give them our reasons that we are only few people here, and we cannot. And we do not have a lot of volunteers who are clear, so if we can pair them, and that was restricted. And with the federal funds, if we go over the cooperative agreements, we have cooperative agreements for all these programs. Like, there are a lot of to-dos and there are a lot of not to-dos. So the to-dos are hard work, and not to-dos are some of them, they do not make sense for us, but yeah, we have to follow the rules.
Thank you so much. So what we're alluding to, and the next question is going to go to Lori, but what we're alluding to is when you saw that chart that Leslie shared, when the previous administration altered the refugee program, there was a third resettlement agency in town called World Relief. They had to actually close and no longer provide services in our community. So you went from 3 resettlement agencies to now 2, and as Laura and Halai just spoke to, both of them had to downsize their own staffs. So then, fast forward a few more years, once the policy was lifted or reformed, you then had a giant influx of need and support, and they had to restaff from what was a really robust program, but then had to be scaled back due to the federal policy. So, Lori, we just spoke a little bit about those 90 days, so where predominantly the support is coming from Lutheran Social Services and Catholic Charities. What do you find after those 90 days? What are the common needs and supports that the families are asking for?
So after the initial 90 days, it just depends. As you heard stories here, there's a broad spectrum of skill levels in the refugees that arrive here. Halai's great success story of somebody jumping right in and starting their own business is amazing. A lot of the refugees that come here need that little extra help for a longer period of time. And so when their case is closed, as they mentioned, they'll get a resource packet, and I'll tell them, you know, immigration, go to JALA, and a bunch of lists the same as Dr. Kaplan had given to us earlier. We are one of those places, and they will come to us for support. They'll walk in with their paperwork. They need help with this. They are integrated into their communities, but a lot of times they don't want their communities to know their personal business. So having another trusted resource out there where they can come and get help, especially they really value an American, because an American knows the American systems, and they really want to work within that and learn that. So we try to navigate that with them. After that, you know, they get English, they're growing in their English, they're getting better job skills, they're getting higher level employment, they're becoming entrepreneurs and opening up businesses, as we talked about already. They're buying homes in our communities. It's a joy when you can see them become citizens and attend one of those naturalization ceremonies, and then you see them purchase their first home. My husband's a mortgage loan officer on the side, so he has been able to be helpful in that area as well. And so it's just beautiful to see the progression of when they started and now where they're at, and how they're just so integrated into our communities, and they're enriching our environments, and they give back, not only within their own communities, they want to give back cross-culturally, and that's awesome to see as well.
And we mentioned earlier about your mental health support. So are you the only provider of mental health support for refugees, and can you speak a little bit about
Sure.
what that program looks like?
So we are the contracted provider through the Refugee Health Program. There's lots of mental health agencies in town, but we are focused on refugee mental health. So our clinicians are specially trained in refugee trauma and recovery. We get our referrals from Lutheran, we get them from Catholic, we get them from the Department of Health when they go through their health screenings. And so that is a free program. We don't charge for any of that. We've also been able to secure an Uber Health grant, so we get that transportation barriers eliminated so they can get to services, and if at least we can get them set up on telehealth their first visit. So we've tried to eliminate all the barriers they are, because as you know, and as we've heard, there's a lot of trauma in their life from war and persecution, and really becoming self-sufficient is being able to heal from all that trauma as well. So
Yeah, thank you for pointing that out, because what stood out to me among the many things when I was sitting through, in this case, she was Dr. Kaplan, because she was full, audience full of undergraduate students, was just taking that step back to acknowledge that all of these families and individuals are fleeing war and persecution. So thinking about that trauma of being in a war-torn environment, likely having to escape in the middle of the night, and not through hyperbole, but actuality, and then being under quick notice, congratulations, you're moving, but you don't know where. And so I can't even fathom, so the degree of, when you really think about it, the degree of empathy that it takes to acknowledge that they are fleeing, but are also trying to look forward. So how do you balance the past and ensure that they're set up for the success of the future? So thank you to all of you who are advising and supporting them in processing both. So Basma, as a refugee and a recognized national leader in the refugee and immigrant rights movement, why do you think advocating for refugee resettlement programming is important, and what can the public do to support those advocacy efforts?
Thank you. And now we can go to the slides. So actually, we had a really successful webinar yesterday. We had over 150 people nationwide attended, and we do these quarterly to really educate the public about the advocacy and what action they can take to really make sure that the federal government doing their job on the resettlement, supporting resettlement, and really to fill these gaps ongoing. So really quickly, this is a 20-minute presentation. I'm going to go just like 5 minutes. So really, I want you really to understand how this works. In every year in September, the president decide on the refugees number that they get to be admitted the following year. So last year, we had the Biden administration decided that we can bring 125,000 refugees in 2023. Through our national partners, that's not going to happen in 2023. We will be able maybe to bring 27,000 refugees through the whole year, just because up to this moment, we have around, we were able to resettle around 9,000 refugees nationwide. So when we check the progress, we're not going to reach that number. This year, the refugees coming from these countries that I had listed, and even with numbers, just for your record. And I also want to share that even though we do have people coming through the other humanitarian pathway, which is including Afghans and Ukrainians, but that is not something we really want the government to do ongoing, because this is not a permanent protection status like the refugee program. So these numbers are a little different from the refugee numbers that we have. And we can go to the next slide. I just want this to be in your radar. So back in the days, in 2008, we used to even have more than 70,000 refugees as average coming to the US, and since 2017 you see the huge drop, and then of course because of the pandemic that's also affected, and now we are just going back really to resettle refugees and really work on the resettlement program, which is a huge work. Yes, and this actually just showing you, as I explained, even though the expected number for 2023 is 125,000, but this is actually what we will be aiming to resettle in the whole United States. So these are the ongoing challenges that we are facing. Of course, funding is a huge issue when we talk about the refugee resettlement program, and just to go back, over 1/3 actually of the resettlements were closed, and now we are actually rebuilding the resettlement program all over the country. So it's while we are rebuilding, we are resettling refugees. Also, Dr. Kaplan spoke a little bit about the vetting process. Since 9/11, the vetting process started expanding more and more, and that's itself really being a big barrier to many people who, even though they are qualified to be refugees, but because of the things that they cannot prove, they are being denied in the process, and many people in many countries don't even have access. Where you see the word, the letters USRAB is the U.S. Refugee Admission Program. So all over the world, there's offices. Does that mean just stop? So many of these offices have been closed also, so people even cannot reach to these offices to go through the process. So that's the other challenge. And I said really quickly about the complementary pathway that we need to rebuild the U.S. Refugee Admission Program, because that's a permanent protection, not like the Pearly program. Next slide. I also wanted to list it that it's not all challenges. We are seeing some hope of things that's happening. We have seen last year in 2022, even though the numbers of refugees resettled were not the numbers that we really expected or wanted the administration to bring, but we were able to have 105,000 people arrive to the U.S. through the refugee program and the Pearly and other programs. And that just shows that we are capable of welcoming people. We just really need to invest in the refugee resettlement program more. We also have seen that the USCIS interviews have, and maybe we can go to the next slide just to make sense. So in 2020, because of the pandemic, the USCIS offices all around the country were not open, and they were not conducting interviews. So we can see now that the numbers actually came really up, and there have been, if we go back to the slide before, just to show the number, so there's 44,000 refugees interviews happened in 2022, from just in 2020, just 1,375. And the other hope that we are seeing, also private sponsorship, which is just started. I don't have time to talk about it, but it's a great opportunity that we are actually seeing in the US. That's why we need to advocate. So this is why we really need to advocate for the program, and this is the ways we do it. We want to hold the administration accountable for rebuilding the resettlement program. We want to support robust federal funding for refugee and forcibly displaced person, and support legislation that strengthen the refugee resettlement program. And the next slide. Every year, for many years, and this is something that I have been going every year to DC to advocate for the refugee program through the Refugee Council USA Advocacy Days. And it's just an amazing way of practicing the freedom in this country. I have never met in Iraq an elected official to speak about what my community challenges was facing. But when I came to the US, within the first year, I was able to speak to a Congress member and just telling them the importance of the refugee program. They listened and they took an action. And from there, I found that my voice mattered. And that's what we are really trying to do. We are trying to help, not trying, we are doing. We are investing in refugees themselves, in their voices, in their strategic communication, in their leadership, in understanding advocacy and the importance of civic engagement so they can be in DC advocating for the refugee program. And I think the next slide is, so this is how you can take action today. Check the link. I'm sure these slides could be shared.
Yep.
But really, you can sign this petition and tell your Congress members how you can support the refugee program. And the last slide. So in 2017, and this something that I have started through the Florida Immigrant Coalition, we started to gather refugees from all over the state, take them to Tallahassee to tell the legislators ways that they can, one, some of them, they don't even know what a refugee is. not like many of you in the room. So we need to educate them really about the refugee program, who we are, and why it's important for this program to continue to work. So we started in 2018. Every year we take over 100 refugees to Tallahassee to advocate for the refugee program. And this year, Pierre is actually doing that, organizing the refugee program, Refugee Advocacy Days in Tallahassee, and it's gonna be in April. He can share more information in the table about it. But it just shows how important to invest in the refugees' leadership, really, so we can be the advocate for the refugee program. Thank you.
Thank you. So, as Basma was just speaking about one way that you can get engaged, so we'll make sure that these slides are available from an advocacy standpoint. I'm going to have the panelists close out by answering the same question. If I wanted to help today, what is one way that I could get engaged? So we'll hear from Lori, and then Hala, and then Laura.
Get engaged in each of our
Right, or
agencies?
if I
Okay.
wanted to support refugee resettlement efforts, especially acknowledging that there is a giant deficit between the capacity and the support that these agencies had just a few years ago and what they're trying to make up. So we're acknowledging any support that you could need.
Okay, thank you. For us, that would be twofold. As you can tell, the numbers and our support services are continuing to grow exponentially. As more refugees are arriving, there's more need for that service. So growing that support service program and adding additional staff is a big part of that for us. In addition to that, we are working on a big housing initiative. Housing has always been our heart since living with the refugees and seeing how they get treated. We have land available to us. We have a land lease that we anticipate signing in the next couple of months. We had a big donation at the end of last year that is our seed money for renderings, for rezoning, for surveys, and all of that. And we anticipate at the end of this year that we will be able to start our capital campaign, which will be a combination of an investor donor type model, so that we can bring refugee housing and housing focus towards refugees and their needs into reality. Because we truly believe that housing should be a place of peace. They should be able to come home and rest with their families and not worry that they don't have a safe place for the kids to play outside, or that they have to fight with somebody about their AC getting fixed. Their home should be a place of peace and rest, and that's what we really want to advocate for.
Thanks, Lori.
I think when I moved to the state, I figured out from the questions people were asking that people never met a refugee. And I want to make it easier to people, because when you meet a person, you make that personal connection, and you will never be rather than an advocate for the refugee program. So that's why Weave Tales existed, really, so we can create the space for you to learn about the refugee program through the many stories that we were able to publish, and through the many training that we were able to support refugees to enhance their public speaking, storytelling, and advocacy, to make sure that they communicate the best way about the refugee program and about the importance of creating a community of welcome that where we all could belong to. So stay informed, really connect with a refugee, read about the community that you are part of and you are investing in. Because if you are investing in the refugee community in Jacksonville, that means you are investing in the whole community overall. So just stay informed, and I shared a petition for you to support with. And if any time you have a meeting and you want a refugee to speak at your meeting, let us know. We would love to provide you with what you need to make sure that you are covering that topic in the right way.
Before I go on how you can help Catholic charities, Basma mentioned on the private sponsorship program. So it's a program, I will go really quick, it's a program that every American citizen can sponsor a refugee. So if you want to learn more about this program, please go to Welcome Corp's website. There you will be able to read how you can sponsor a family. And for Catholic charities, we accept donation, in-kind donation. The easiest way to impact is to support us financially. So and also we accept in-kind donation and volunteers. Please go visit our website at CCBJax. You can learn more about our organization there and also find easy ways how to support us. And also we accept in-kind donation at our regional office, which is located at 40 East Adams Street, and also at Providence Center, which is located at 134 East Church Street. We accept donations Mondays, Tuesdays, Thursdays, 9 to 1:30. So if it's so easy, if you have a couch that it's in your garage and taking this space and you don't want it anymore and somebody else can use it, you can just stop by our office, by Providence Center, just ring the door and drop it there. And if you have like 2-3 couches, a bed, or like you think like it's not gonna fit in your car, just give us a call. We will come to your door and we will collect all that from you. Thank you.
As similar to Hawaii, we always need volunteers. So if you have expertise in anything and want to come lead a workshop, we offer a number of different workshops every month, every week to our clients. It could be a health workshop or just any kind of skill building workshop. We love to offer them and let them be able to be educated more on a certain topic. And even if it's a fun skill, we've done origami for the youth or any kind of thing that you feel like you can contribute, we'd love to offer a workshop. And then that one-on-one volunteering, whether that be in LSS with a family, with the youth, or in our storage units, looking at helping organize donations. And then similarly to Catholic Charities, we also accept in-kind donations. We don't want to have to go and utilize their small grant to buy new items for their apartment. We want to try to have all their grant go towards rent so that they can get more months of rent out of that prior to them starting to have to pay. So we try to stock their apartments with donations. So we really rely on those.
Thank you all. Can I ask you all to give our panelists and our keynote speaker a round of applause, please? So I am looking at the clock, and I know we have questions. So what I'm going to offer is our panelists will still be here, but I want to be conscious for those who may have to leave. They're going to stay here if you have a question, but this is permission for those of you who may need to step out. No judgment, no shame. If you do need to leave to catch your next meeting, please know you have permission to do so. I'm going to open up for 2 questions, and I see Dave Pearson has the first one.
I easily understand the Ukrainian, the Afghani, those issues. Our media continues to focus on the southern border. And I'm just trying to clarify, are all of these people trying to seek refugee status, or what is this? I mean, guess what is the situation with the southern border? And they keep talking about all the thousands of people trying to come into the United States. Are they, at this point, just trying to seek refugee status, or what's the situation?
Yeah, so they're trying to seek asylum status, which is a constitutional right. You can knock up on Border Patrol and ask for asylum. And they would have to go through a long court process and be able to prove, just like refugees, that they deserve to be here, or that they need to be here for their protection. Being in Florida, we do see a lot of Cuban Haitian entrants. They are here legally. The United States does welcome them to come to the United States. They have employment papers and whatnot. So we are seeing an influx in Cuban Haitians right now, which are not in any of the numbers that we display to you because they don't go through a resettlement program. They can come to our services for other services like employment, case management, youth mentoring, English, but they don't get resettlement services. And we've seen, I don't even know the number of the last year, we were so bombarded with so many, maybe thousands in come to this area that are Cuban and Haitian this past year. I don't know if that answers your question.
Asylum seekers do not necessarily get all the government support systems that refugees get once they are accepted.
Right. Yeah.
I will just add that the other different is the refugee vetting process happened outside the U.S. in a third country, while the asylum seekers, it's happening while they are in the country. So they are going through the process inside. The other thing is that we have been hearing a lot in the news that's the Trump administration and now even the Biden administration, they are trying to create asylum ban. So no one able to seek asylum at the border. So that's the problem that we are seeing now.
Do we have another question? John? I know you can project, but there's a mic.
So a friend of mine's stepson-in-law, his wife, and their daughter have recently come here from Ukraine, and my friend's wife is Ukrainian. But they have a 2-year visa, and are they able to access the same programs and services that you are offering, and how do they find out about them?
So Ukrainians are, they came to United States with a parole status, humanitarian parole status, and they are supposed to update their status within 2 years to a temporary TPS, TPS status, and they are not eligible for reception and placement services. Because the U.S. government originally thought that the sponsors will be helping them with all those resettlement services, which is temporary housing, food, clothing, paying for their flight tickets and all that. But then later on, I think they realized that we are not getting a lot of help from the sponsors. And then back in May 21st, they became eligible for the other ORR services, Office of Refugee Resettlement Services, which is one of those programs, or matching grant program. And through that program, Ukrainians can receive rent and utility assistance, and also employment assistance through that program. But originally they are not eligible, or unfortunately they are not eligible for the initial reception and placement program. And if your family is interested in our programs, they can walk into our office, and then we will complete like an intake interview with them to see if they are eligible for our program. And once that process is done, they will be scheduled for an enrollment interview or enrollment appointment. And once they are enrolled in the program, then they will be able to receive all those services from our agency.
I said 2, but my friend is here, so I'm going to... Last question.
Thank you. So sponsorship, it just brought to mind something that I'm seeing in the hospital. If a family sponsors another family, the income of that sponsoring family factors into future eligibility for benefits. And so I see some nods. It definitely impacts healthcare. So I don't know what a family should be cognizant about, but I do believe that there's some consequences for sponsoring, right? So if I make a certain dollar amount and I sponsor my new friend Honey, my financial makeup is what's considered when she's applying for benefits.
I can answer. So confidentially in this room, I sit on the advisory board of the national sponsorship space. And one thing I will share, it takes 5 people to come together to sponsor one family. And each person should come up with, for each person, you need to gather 2,500 to really start the sponsorship process. And that will be just help with bringing them to the country, not the after all. So you will be able to help them as a sponsor, really walk them through like the work and the resettlement process, but you will be the 5 people who gather together will be pretty much supporting their resettlement process, if that's helpful.
It is. I think, for example, I'm thinking of a family that's been recently impacted. They moved in with a family, and when they started to apply for various benefits, it went by the household.
Yeah, and technically, really, a household should be your family unit, not the people that you're living with. So it just depends on how you fill out that benefits form.
All right, my friends, we have more questions. So again, our panelists will be here for a few more minutes if you would like to ask them of any questions. We had hoped to also have table conversations. So at your table, several of the seats are empty because they're up here on the panel. They were going to share a story of impact from either their own lived experience from a migration to this country, or clients that they've helped serve. So if you want to hear those stories, you can have those conversations right after. I'm ever conscious of the clock, so I do apologize. We went a few minutes over, but I am grateful for all of you for attending and being a great audience for this topic. Our next 2 donors forums, I'll make sure you get all of these materials and any information about these specific agencies and how you can support. You will receive that in about a week via email. And then the next 2 donors forums for the spring are scheduled at the end of March. On March 29th, we are having a national speaker. Her name is Coventry Edwards Pitt. She is an expert in multi-generational family and giving. And so she's going to be our keynote speaker. Again, Wednesday. It's Wednesday, March 29th at the University Center at UNF. And then in May, we're going to explore mental health. So the newest capacity building tool in our community is 988 Hotline. So we're going to explore how the 988 Hotline is uniquely impacting the mental health fabric of our community. So those are 2 topics to look forward to. I'm always open to your ideas and suggestions on other topics we can explore. But I'm going to close today by again saying thank you for our panelists and our speaker for introducing refugee resettlement initiatives in our community. And for those of you who are interested, again, you can follow up with them individually. Thank you so much.